is against real and not imaginary hardships, or to use the language of the state prosecutor, so-called hardships. South Africa is the richest country in Africa and could be one of the richest countries in the world. But it is a land of extremes and remarkable contrasts. The whites enjoy what may well be the highest standard of living in the world, whilst Africans live in poverty and misery.
In the mid-1900s, South Africa saw a significant change. Racism, segregation, and oppression were all common. This new wave of hatred and prejudice needed to be put to an end. At a time where segregation was the law in South Africa, Nelson Mandela showed leadership by being a political activist, becoming the first black president of South Africa, and starting the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The short-term effect was that Mandela became a symbol of inspiration for the African people. In the long term, Mandela brought together a country once filled with hate to become one where people live in harmony.
In 1948, a system called apartheid was set up in South Africa by a group called the National Party. This system was a form of racial segregation used to separate the black Africans from the whites who were now colonizing Africa. In this new society, blacks had minuscule rights compared to those of the Europeans. In addition, the wealthiest and most powerful people in South Africa were white, while the blacks were poor, oppressed, and even forced to live in designated areas.
I asked him what it was that the African really wanted.
The Africans want the franchise on the basis of one man, one vote. They want political independence.
Do you see Africans being able to develop in this country without the European being pushed out?
We have made it very clear in our policy that South Africa is a country of many races. There is room for all the various races in this country.
Are there many educated Africans in South Africa?
Yes. We have a large number of Africans who are educated and who are taking part in the political struggles of the African people. The question of education has nothing to do with the question of the vote. On numerous occasions, it has been proved in history that people can enjoy the vote even if they have no education. Of course, we desire education, and we think it's a good thing. But you don't have to have education in order to know that you want certain fundamental rights, you have got aspirations, you have got claims. It has nothing to do with education whatsoever.
Living his early life as a lawyer in a small lawyer firm, Mandela became acquainted with other young men, many of which who were involved with the ANC, or the African National Congress. The ANC was an anti-apartheid group that sought for equality. Mandela eventually joined the ANC and took part in political protests and rallies in 1942. For many years, the ANC did not see much success. In 1944, Mandela, as well as other ANC radicals, co-founded the ANCYL, the ANC Youth League. By 1951, Mandela became president of the Youth League, marking the start of his leadership. The Youth League focused on a more assertive approach towards their cause. In 1960, the ANC was banned, and Mandela had already served multiple small sentences in prison. Mandela was not discouraged, however. Mandela, along with his fellow ANC members, continued the fight against apartheid, facing prison time, hard labor, and even death. On June 12, 1964, Nelson Mandela was convicted of sabotage against the government and was sentenced to life in prison. Although he spent 27 years in prison before he was released, Nelson Mandela served as an inspiration for the ANC and anti-apartheid movement throughout his entire sentence. On February 2, 1990, the ANC was unbanned, and 9 days later, Nelson Mandela was released. Upon his release, Mandela showed no hatred or need for revenge towards those who put him in prison, setting a true example for all of South Africa. Instead of continuing the cycle of hate, Nelson Mandela put an end to it. Mandela's leadership for South Africa did not stop there, however.
Nelson Mandela's legacy was peaceful and powerful. The rule of law, freedom of speech, and free and fair elections are what Mandela passed on to its nation. In prison, Mandela learned that forgiveness and generosity, and all above respect, were weapons of political persuasion as powerful as any gun. One thing Mandela did was change the national anthem. The national anthem consisted of two songs put together. One song is Nkosi Sikelel iAfrika, or God Bless Africa, sung at black protest rallies during the 46 years between the rise and fall of apartheid. The other is Die Stem, or The Call, the old white anthem in celebration of European settlers' conquest of Africa's southern tip, his purpose being to put together from the rival tune's harsh notes a powerfully symbolic message of national harmony. After being selected as South Africa's first democratically elected president, he established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 1995 to help heal the country and bring about a reconciliation of its people by uncovering the truth about human rights violations that had occurred during the period of apartheid. They did not prosecute individuals for past crimes, which is how the commission mainly differed from the Nuremberg trials that prosecuted Nazis after World War II. They investigated human rights abuse committed from 1960 to 1994, including the circumstances, factors, and context of such violations, allowing victims the opportunity to tell their story. Granting amnesty, which is an official pardon for the people who have been convicted of political offenses, constructing an impartial historical record of the past, and making amends for a wrong one is done. The effectiveness of the TRC Commission was measured on a variety of levels, namely, its usefulness in terms of bringing out the truth of what had happened during the apartheid system, the feelings of reconciliation that could be linked to the Commission, and the positive effects both domestically and internationally that the Commission brought about in a variety of ways, from the political environment of South Africa to the economic one.
Nelson Mandela was an extraordinary man who managed to lead a country from chaos and inequality to one where everyone has the same rights. Mandela fought apartheid relentlessly. He spent 27 years in prison for his cause, and after being released, he was voted into being the first black president of South Africa. Finally, when Mandela was president, he managed to establish a system that settled any past issues created by the apartheid. Nelson Mandela used his leadership and passion to inspire a nation, bring down a corrupt government, and ultimately to create a legacy that will live on forever.
I stand before you filled with deep pride and joy that we can loudly proclaim from the rooftops, free at last.